done lately? It's Coons. What have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them.
Good evening, and welcome. Let's Talk Too. And tonight is Tuesday night. Every Tuesday night, we have a conversation with our sister Azima. And tonight, we will be discussing second part of the second, or let's just say some more reiteration to the first part of our show, People of the Land, What Secrets Do They Hold? And unfortunately, this week, Chief Mimi is not going to be with us. She had a prior engagement, but trust me, she misses us, and she will be back next week with vengeance. Um, it's always a pleasure, and I hope that um, those that watched the show last week, even if you didn't watch the show live, you got some benefit from the show, and it gives you an introduction to what direction we're trying to go, and it'll give you some foundation of what was here before um, this became
Colonialism, yeah. Before
colonialized.
colonialism
Yeah,
came.
and
Hmm.
it's very important, and we got something very interesting in store for tonight. But please, we ask anybody in the chat while Sister Azima is discussing what she's going to discuss. This would be like a different type of show. It'd be more of an open discussion.
Hmm.
Um, Ask any question you want based on the information. You guys in the chat, like I always say, you guys make the show. I know a lot of times people don't ask questions, but you guys make the show. If you have a question in reference to the topic, ask it, and Sister Azima will answer it to the best of her ability. Um, with that, Sister Azima, what's going on?
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I hope everyone's in good spirits. We are in the time of Jubilee. Most of the world is celebrating the new year, which comes in April, the end of March, April. That is when we start, our spring solstice. And that to them is the beginning of the new year. Um, the reason you celebrate the new year in January is because we talked about laws. We have natural law, we have divine law. Okay. What we're practicing now are statutes, procedures, and policies, or statutes, regulations, and policies. And so when you do that, the ruling class of society can move the needle on when things should be. And so they moved the needle to January for economic control and for control of assets. So by moving that needle, that time frame to the beginning of the year to say January is the beginning of everything, but you know that when animals go into their hibernation, they're going to hibernate through November, December, and January. Think about it. The groundhog has to come out in February. He sees his shadow, he goes back in for 6 more weeks. We know that's just a metaphor. But what they're telling you is that spring isn't here. And when spring comes, that's when you see everything blossom. You can feel it in the air, you can smell it. If you're on the coastal lines, the oceans smell different. If you're near any body of water, it will change how it smells. You'll see a flurry of activities, even if you don't see leaves on the tree. So you must understand that natural law precedes all man-made law. Okay, and natural law is based on divine law and divine principles. You cannot change those laws. Okay, it's based on morality, it's based on truth and understanding. And if you can put up the if you can put up the seven principles of Ma'at, the seven ideals of Ma'at, do you still have that in front of you?
Mhm.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So in the that's the structure of a society. Leave that. That's fine. In a structure of society, you have seven key things. We call them the pillars or the structures of society. You have divine or natural laws, okay, and you have family and basic constructs. You have architecture, education. Can you scroll that up a little more for me? You will have economics and business, health, and then governance. All of those is what makes a society. These things here will have always been around. They were the reason why the African nations were called nation states as opposed to a tribe. There are four levels of societal changes or development. There are four levels of development in a society in which the people go through. The first is a clan. And I don't mean the Ku Klux Klan, okay? But a clan is usually, the word clan is it's not there. It's Old English. The Old English word for clan is children, family, progeny. You got that? Children, family, progeny. Clan is always run by the most senior or the most dominant male figure in that clan structure. The clan structure is always core family. Some of us have big core families and others have small core families. When it comes to marriage or a different union in that family, they they tend to go out, they have to go outside of the family, okay, and bring a new person in. Now they do it by clans do it in different ways. Some go out and have a big celebration and they bring a person in or they pay a person to come in. Others tend to kidnap or abduct someone and bring them into the family. But whatever their system that they've set up, they don't tend to marry within the family. They always go outside of the family. Now, the only time they may marry within the family is if the family structure itself, the clan, is not large enough and they end up having not like-minded people, but godchildren, godparents, close friends that you grew up with and they were like family, but they're not a blood tie. Therefore, you can marry families. The clan can marry across that since it's not a blood tie. Once it becomes a blood tie, then they have to change and go out and seek others to come into the clan. The next level is a tribe. The next level of the social structure is a tribe. And tribes are historically indigenous groups with a strong sense of identity and a shared heritage. Okay. So that means that the ones that we're very familiar with are the what we call Native Americans of America. And that's not the correct word. Chief Mimi will correct me on that. But they are considered tribes. There's a large cluster of them that have come together in like-minded thought. They have the same purpose. They are driven with a sense of identity and shared heritage. So let's say Choctaw and the Crow may have the same heritage. I don't know. I'm just throwing this out here. And they come together, they cleave together or bond together because they have shared heritage that they want to do or bring together to strengthen the tribe so the tribe can protect itself. Um, and the tribes normally have a major chief, but that chief's wife plays a major role in the development of the tribe. In Africa, it was the same way. The difference is that a woman could be the chief of the tribe in certain regions within Africa and even in the Caribbean, certain areas in the Caribbeans. Okay, so then you have the tribe. So you have the clan, which is all family structure. Tribes are groups of people who come together with a shared interest, a shared heritage, and the shared purpose for the protection of the tribe. The next level is called a community. We have that here in America. We know them as the Amish, the Mennonites, okay, and the Quakers. Many of them are still here today. And so those become communities. And what makes them different from a tribe? A tribe means indigenous groups with a strong sense of identity and shared heritage, often sharing the same language, political structure, and traditions. Clans are strictly families or extended families known as godparents, godchildren, god brothers and sisters, but they are a family of one, always led by the most dominant patrilineal figure in that. The tribes can have both masculine and feminine leadership. The community is characterized by a shared geographical location, okay, a common interest or social bond. So the community structure is a little different than the tribe and very much different than the clan. Um, in their shared community, outsiders can come in. They have to be, I want to say, immersed into what's going on in that particular community. They must give up what they were familiar with in what they consider the outside world. Therefore, they're not contaminating the environment with their views, their thoughts. And so they come into these communities um, for a myriad of reasons. Some people may have had a very hard life out here. This doesn't work for them. They met someone in these communities and felt that a community would work better for them. The closest thing, and it's not really that, are your gated communities or your places where you have HOAs. Those are clustered communities and they're clustered together for a particular purpose, but not always for the benefit of all. And these communities are there to benefit the masses, which is everybody in the community. They also develop a a political or governing methodology to determine how they're going to view society and how they can keep what they consider the intrusion of technology and stuff away from their communities, taking away what they consider the relationship between God and the community. The community also is not only based on a geographic location and common interests or social bonds, but they share some very specific values, goals, and activities. And they often have a strong sense of belonging. So when I used to work for American Red Cross and we would go out and do blood donations, we went to the Quakers, we went to the Mennonites, and we went to the Amish. And we would do blood draws. But it's also where you would get a chance to see one of many of the seven principles of the Nguzo Saba, which I call natural laws and divine laws. the people would come together and literally do barn raising. And the first time I saw that, it just amazed me to see a whole community of men, 400 or 500 of them, come together, put a barn together, a 2-story barn, 25 feet high. They'd raise these walls, set them in this foundation, and in a week, they'd have a barn. Okay, and it was very organized, and the barns don't fall down. And so now, I'm going to digress. Now we have a lot of people who cannot afford big homes or even a house in some parts of the United States. And so we find that these people will go to the Amish and ask them to build them a home. And they build these nice houses. I mean, the houses are solid. They're not going anywhere. They make it through tornadoes and all kinds of things. And they are built to last. Now, you're not going to have all these wonderful amenities where we say electricity and all of this kind of stuff. They do have potbelly stoves. They do use a fireplace to heat their buildings. But the way the buildings are structured and the insulation, you only need one big potbelly stove, and you cook on that stove and the whole house is heated. You can vent the house. When I was growing up, we didn't have, I remember when the air conditioner was invented, we didn't have air conditioning. We had a box fan. We had sleeping porches. The porches were screened in and they were real big. You come out of the house, you put your mat or whatever on the porch. You clean the porch up, you put your mat down there, you put the box fan out there, and the box fan would be behind a galvanized bucket that had dry ice, because the ice houses were on every corner, especially in the Black community. You would go and buy a block of dry ice. You would put it down in the tub. You'd put the fan behind it, turn that fan on, and it was like central air. And it would last for 8 hours. And you could sleep out on that porch. You didn't have to worry about bugs or anything like that. People didn't come up and bother you. You had a screen door, but the screen door had a small opening. The screens were made that people just couldn't cut them open. They would be like 2 or 3 layers thick, but they were well built, and you knew that you could sleep on these sleeping porches. The men that slept on there, they slept in a rocking chair so they can always be aware of what was going on. But everybody else would sleep out there on the porches. And so the Amish and the Mennonites, they do something similar to that to keep their houses cooler in the summer. And then the potbelly stove in the winter. I know what that's like, because I was young enough to remember seeing it. I didn't always see it as I grew up, but it was there in my life because that's what my grandfather built the home we lived in. And so we had a potbelly stove. We also had an outhouse, and I remember that quite well. Even though this was in the city, most of the city was still very rural. And so you did. And his outhouse wasn't separated that much from the regular house, but you did have to go outside, down the steps, and 10 feet to the outhouse if you had to go. And you just learn to do those things. And then over time, my grandfather and my father joined the outhouse to the regular home. And that's when we started having flushing toilets. That was, wow, a feature. Okay, and we enjoyed that. That was much different than anything else we've dealt with. So everyone thinks that's so far in the past. I'm in my 70s, and it's not. And if I can remember it, it's not that far gone. So we are learning that society comes in categories, structures. And the social structure is a clan. A clan is a direct family or an extended family. People you grew up with that you call an auntie, godmother, godbrother, whatever. But it's always first and foremost family, always head by a patrilineal person, the most dominant male figure in the family. Then you come to what we call the tribes. Tribes had, uh, they were indigenous people. The most interesting thing about them was that they shared a common language, and common goals, and the common culture. So your tribes historically shared a language, a heritage, a strong identity, and this is what developed their political structures as well as their traditions. And then you have communities. Communities are usually, like I said, geographically located, and the people have a common interest or a social bond. They form these communities as an extension of shared values, goals, activities, which brings about a strong sense of belonging. Okay. Then the last group or development of societies or nations. Africa was rife, RIFE, with nation states. We always talk about Egypt, but it was called Kemet and Cush. Egypt is a Greek word and it was pronounced Egyptos, which meant the land of the blacks. So the Greeks, who initially were melanated skinned people, as the Huns and all of them, the Hittites, we don't want to get into all this history, but the Hittites and the Huns came into those regions, which tend to be fairer skinned people, more pink toned people. They began to identify areas. And so the Greeks, the fair skinned Greeks, called Cush, Kemet, Aegyptos, the land of the blacks. Italy, the Greek word for Italy, is the little land of Egypt. Hear me out. Italy means little land of Egypt, which meant that it was owned and conquered and ruled by the Aegyptos or the Africans of Cush, Kemet, Chad, okay, in those areas. And so the Ethiopians and the Eritreans, all of that, this is what we know as Egypt today. Remember when I first met you all and I told you about faggot? Remember I told you if you had faggots, you were a wealthy person because now you had wood branches that you can use to cook food, to heat water, to heat your house. That word now means something entirely different. The actual definition is the same, but the meaning has changed. And we have to be careful when we let the ruling class disseminate our information for us. So it is imperative that we understand the laws. When you understand something, you see it from the view of the people who are dominating the social structure of your current living condition. When you understand it, it means that you've taken time to ingest the information and apply it to your life. When you live your life through divine laws, like we talked about, the ideals of Ma'at, truth, justice, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity, and prosperity, you automatically feel that way. You have family members who say, I'm living in the image of God, and they're trying to live up to these standards. This just becomes a way of life. You don't have to try to live it because when you live like this, you're living within the natural laws. And the natural laws bring about morality. The natural laws, when you practice the principles of Ma'at, brings about prosperity. Prosperity is not assets or money. Remember, we traded and bartered all the time. One time it could be food, another time it could be clothing or shells or fragrances, or it could be faggots, bundles of sticks. It could be straw. It could be whatever we felt was important for me to have at that time. I'm willing to barter. Eggs, okay, cattle. It was with the advent of the Romans who decided, and the Greeks who decided, we would not barter. We're going to use coins. Now, Mansa Musa had coins. Don't get me wrong. He had them, but it was mostly for his travel. As we travel outward, we may not know what to bring in order to barter with people in other parts of the world. So you do what's best. You bring coins. They're easier to handle, and they were always gold, and gold was abundant across the planet, and so it made a good medium of exchange. Gold is a soft metal. Okay. When you flatten it out and it's real thin, you can apply it to anything. And some gold is edible. So it served many purposes. And for the blacksmiths or the smites who understood how to use the chemical processes to add to or change the structure of gold, it was a great thing for them to have. And so what I'm what my goal here and Chief Mimi's goal is for you to have a greater scope of knowledge dealing with divine law, natural law, and how the current structure has taken policies, regulations, and codes and told you that was law. Okay. And we abide by it. Okay. If you've ever gone into a courtroom and hear them debate, then they call it arguments, but it's debating. Debate means to argue a position, position that you're standing on. You will hear them quote statements out of law books. And they would, give you subset this, subsection so and so based on, M versus V. Okay. And what they're doing is that they're stating a regulation that became a policy that later became a code. Code means that you give it a number, a numeric value, and you codify it in the annals of colonial law. Because before, like the Vikings had been here, but that we'll talk about them further down. The colonial inhabitants that are here, before they came, you had tribes of Indians. They didn't call themselves Indians. They called them by the name that they were, Shawnee, Pawnee, Apache, whatever. They identified themselves by the tribe that they were in. When that tribe began to expand beyond community to a nation state, then they were a nation of Indians that may have been made up of several smaller tribes. They had a council. The purpose of the council, like you have your congressmen and senators, was to be able to state the concerns and the needs and conditions of each individual tribe at the council. At that council meeting, the head person listened to all of this, would meet with all of the council members and come up with suggestions or remedies to address the needs of the tribes that made up this nation. And that's how the current political system is supposed to work. And political means policies. Okay.
We've always had this form of structure since. And I remember yet last week you explained how these these natural laws, these principles,
Hmm.
they have no origin, meaning they have no date.
No.
Nobody knows where they came from. They just
Right.
here.
They.
And different societies, I'll just use societies for lack of better
Hmm.
words,
Hmm.
they all know how to conform within them.
Hmm.
And then during those times, they were able to, based off of those natural principles, they
Hmm.
were able to trade, um, coexist, for lack of better words, until they
Yeah.
started fighting. Or
Yeah.
you know what amazes me, and I don't know if it amazes anybody in the chat, but the language barrier that they would always, when you traveled, you would always have a translator. Like
Hmm.
even back then, somebody they would have somebody that knew how to speak the language to wherever they was going. Like, they try to teach people in school that Columbus didn't know where he was going, but that's not true.
Because let me say this to you. Let me see if you understand this. Parlez-vous français?
Yeah.
Qu'est-ce que sayez-vous? Sia eka, pata netru. How does that language make you feel? Does it feel threatening?
No, not at
No.
all.
Okay. So we did not necessarily, language was never a barrier because once I told you, you are a frequency that vibrates.
Hmm.
You may be the frequency that vibrates from a flute, but if you're vibrating at the same frequency that I am, I know what you're saying.
And that's what you explained before, like
Right.
knowing that frequency, or being spoken to on that frequency,
Hmm.
you automatically understand this
Hmm.
is a welcoming frequency
Hmm.
or a threatening frequency. You know from the language, like, okay,
Hmm.
I don't know what you're saying, but I know that it's not bringing me harm.
Right. Now, I'm going to digress again. The Incas, the Aztecs. Remember, they would murder people and offer up their heart to God. Well, we did a little more research and we found out that they have something called a death whistle. You really don't want to hear the death whistle. Okay. I had a chance to hear it, and I'm not a scary person. Okay. So the death whistle is carved out of ivory, but it's carved in the shape of a skull. That part doesn't bother me because I've been in medicine a long time. Human skull, the human frame, I find very interesting. It's unique. When you blow into it, it sounds like somebody is being murdered. It has that gut wrenching scream, and this is just a whistle. And when they needed to capture sacrificial people, they would blow the death whistle, which would scare them and panic them, and they would run, and they'd end up running directly into the traps or the nets. And now they have captured their prey. And so that's a frequency too. The funny part is, I would like for you all to go and find a video called Cymatic, Cymatic frequencies. And the reason I'm going to ask you to do that is because when you see that they put sand on a sound plate and they turn on certain frequencies, the sand vibrates and begins to take shape. Those shapes are called sigils. Sigils become symbols. Symbols become numbers. Numbers become letters. The letter H is the number 4 upside down. The letter 5 is the S. 3 is an E. How about that? Okay. So when you encapsulate this, into your internal consciousness, you're able to look at something and go like, oh, I'm not going over there. That's not for me. Oh, I don't have to be there. I can do this over here. I can manifest that by speaking these words. And it happens. And at first you're like, wow. But then you realize that you are working within the construct of the natural laws of life. Everyone is looking for a particular God. How can that be? I mean, you'd have to have a God for the Chinese people, the Huns. You'd have to have them for the Hungarians. You'd have to have them for the people from Slovenia, the Czechoslovakians, the Ukrainians. Everybody around the world doesn't believe in the same God. And as you had said earlier, Brother Quentin, about what we had talked about, when you have to look at the way the three prominent religions exist on this planet using code, okay, policies, and regulations. Learn the Punic Wars, learn the religious wars. They spanned a period of almost 800 years. And that is how you begin to indoctrinate people into a system that didn't exist. And then you'll read about Herodotus, you'll read about Arianus, who was a black man, who used to tell them, you're looking for Jesus. Jesus is within. It's not external, it's within. They couldn't kill him because he was a high-ranking pope. They didn't. But they discredited him like they're trying to do Donald Trump and whatever he's thinking about doing. It's because it's going against the grain of those individuals. And remember, go back and look at what was going on in Nicaea, France, when they decided this is going to be the Bible. These are the books we're going to keep in. These are the books we're not going to keep in. If God wrote it, quote unquote, who gets to decide what stays and what doesn't? So until you begin to look at that, this is how you can, this is why I said, this is how you circumvent the law. Okay, I'm going to take a recent thing, Black Lives Matter. It was not created by George Soros. It was grassroots. I know. It sprung up here. Very grassroots. Had a distinct purpose. We always would meet and educate the people on what they needed to do. Same way with the boycotts and the sit-ins and all of that. You had to educate
How
your
important that is, that narrative has been out there, that Black Lives Matter started from George Soros, and you being there in what we would say ground zero, and you know the real origin of Black Lives Matter. How is that when people misinterpret how it started and then what happened to how it basically got co-opted?
It was no different than what they did with the civil rights movement. Okay. They would have you believe that Black folks couldn't work in a lot of places unless civil rights existed. Now, don't get me wrong. My father, as a young man, the work was not always abundant. Now, you have to remember, we're going from indigenous people. The colonizers, North America is not the United States of America. It's Canada and the United States of America. Let's talk about geography right now. It was known as Turtle Island, all of North America. You had nations of people that lived here. long before the advent of the white man. And please don't tell me about Christopher Columbus. He didn't land here. He landed in the islands, the Caribbean islands. He didn't even make it here. Okay. And you must understand that this color was prominent all over the world. Okay. You hear them talk about Atlantis, but how much do you know about the Eye of Horus? When they look at it, when you get an aerial view, Atlantis was supposed to have been this wonderful city somewhere, nobody knew where, right? It's always smoke and mirrors, right? When it comes to us. But Atlantis and the Eye of Horus sit in the Sahara Desert. Where is the Sahara Desert? It's in Africa. Okay, so if it's in Africa and it's sitting on the west coast of Africa, which is near the Atlantic Ocean, the people themselves, the Anunnaki, identify that area as the land of Atlantis. Beautiful. It matches the description. The city is decimated. Something happened and decimated the city. But the congruent rings that are there, the center of it that looks like the Eye of Horus, and all of that. And they talk about that is because when you see the Eye of Horus, you see this city, the way that they call Atlantis, and then you look at the skull. If you take a section of the body of my face off and you can see the skull, you would see the pineal gland. And the Eye of Horus gives you what we call the golden triangle 369. It's all a vibratory frequency. And it's very important to understand those vibratory frequencies.
And explain to us again, why is it 369? What's the significance of those three numbers?
Because it all adds up to the number 9. 9 is the finality. 3 is the beginning. Okay, when we wanted to talk about a woman or the birth of a child, 3 is when she's in the position to receive the seed. 6 is when she's giving birth. 9 is when she's in her second trimester. Important numbers. 3 and 6 gives you 9. 9 and 9 gives you 18. 1 and 8 gives you 9. It always goes back to the 9 levels of consciousness. You cannot escape that. That's divine. You cannot escape that. And so you can put 3 over 6, and you can divide 3 into itself. It goes 1 time, 3 are going to 6 2 times. Okay. But what you're doing is that you're learning the frequency in which you operate. When I write out my full name, and it's a pretty long name, it's Catherine Rusan Kennedy. If you notice that Kennedy, Kennedy, it has 2 E's and 2 N's. Turn the N on its side, it's a Z. Divided in half is the number 7. The E is 3. When you see cymatic energy working, and you look at the video, and you'll begin to see the physical shapes that it takes at certain frequencies, these become sigils. When you see folks throwing up gang symbols, they're throwing up sigils. They don't realize that they're throwing up energy waves. These sigils, they think they're talking to each other in a great language, but they're throwing up sigils. Some people throw up sigils that constantly bring turmoil in their life. Some people's names resonate to frequencies that just bring turmoil in their life. You can take a piece of paper and write 1 through 9. And under where you have written those numbers, you're going to start the alphabet A through Z. So you're going to go A to the ninth letter, come down, and you'll start under A again, which is 1, and go another 9 letters. You have 18. Okay, then you only have to go what? 8 more letters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're at Z. Now go through there, write your name, and then go through there and put all these numbers under each letter in your name. And then in your first name, add those numbers together. If it comes down to 23 or 24, put a plus sign between the 2 and the 4, and you get 6. If you have a middle name, do the same thing. Then your last name, do the same thing. The purpose of that is for you to know what energy you're bringing into your life, into what you do, and how that energy helps structure how you work within this system. And it also determines what laws you're going to adhere to, whether it's the Hermetic laws, the principles of Ma'at, okay, the pillars of building a society, or knowing your relationship in society as a clan, as a tribe member, as a community, or as a nation state. Nation states are the ones that develop policies, procedures, okay, codes, regulations. They have standing armies. They are the ones that decide we need to store water and,
Let me ask you, right?
hmm
Because I know you bring this up, and when you look at it, when you look at the whole picture, and you look at the continent of Africa, and then
hmm
you see why so much, for lack of better words, it always appears to be turmoil because you have tribalism within these nation states
hmm
where you could be from the minority tribe within that one state and the majority tribe in another state, in another country, and it will cause a lot of conflicts with how these two countries intermingle with each other because the tribe, for some of them, is bigger than the nation. They have tribal allegiance. Yeah, they have the
Yeah,
tribal allegiance.
but that's
That
no different than gang allegiance. Some of your gangs are bigger than the populations of certain cities, and
hmm
they have gang affiliations. Is that not tribal? Is that not clannish?
hmm
Okay.
yeah.
However, they have failed to live up to the 7 principles of life.
Mm.
Those tribes are not out there building societies. The gangs are not building societies, are they?
I've
Or are they saying, my
I've
God, we
I've yet to see it. Unfortunately, I have met a lot of guys that was caught up in that stuff,
Mhm.
and a lot of people. I mean, I've when I mean in the hundreds, I literally say in the hundreds of people that I done came across. Um, Nobody has ever told me that they were benefiting from what they're into when it comes to that.
Mhm.
As much as they will, you know, rep it, say
Mhm.
this is what it is, this is their life.
Mhm.
I've yet to meet anybody that said that it really has brought. Oh, they'll say to me, um, this gives me a sense of family, a sense of belonging.
Okay,
How,
that's a clan.
however, when
Mhm.
it comes down to the nitty gritty, most of the times they said that in the end, or towards as they matured, it became nothing but a vicious cycle of murder, death, and mayhem.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And the key thing is that when I was growing up, we were taught the 7 things that made a society. Okay. Remember we talked about that? Your
hmm
pillar structures of society, your spiritual place, you know, agriculture, industry, all of that.
And the reason why I'm glad that you decided to go here today
Mhm.
was this is some of the problems that we have,
Mhm.
descendants of the indigenous descendants of chattel slavery, is that
Mhm.
these principles we don't have, for lack of better words, certain communities that community where we could say this is what we have in our community. Instead, is through integration. Through integration, we lost all this.
I would say that we have, n- well, okay, through integration. I want to say that this is my opinion that you voted politicians in as your voice. When I grew up, neighborhood and block, we had neighborhood or block unit meetings once a month. You would vent, even the kids. And I'm not going to say the 1, 2, and 5 year olds, but the children that were between the ages of 10 up into adulthood, they could say, "Oh, this is not safe." We go down and play at by the railroad track, so and so. It's not safe. We could hear that. Then we would take that to what we call a community council meeting. And the one thing we learned, and we go back to the number 7, is that the span of management, and everybody who's a manager knows the span of management. It's 7. You're at the top, the manager, and the 6 people under you are going to hear exactly what you tell them because you can say it to them in such a manner that all 6 people will hear it the same way. Now, you have seen some of these game shows where they'll have 10 people lined up, and one person starts the statement, "I'm going to the store." And by the time it gets over here, the guy said, "The dog is dead." Okay, that's because when you get to the seventh person knows what you're going to say, but they have made the decision to modify it to make it more important. And that little modification creates that hiccup where everything changes. So Black Lives Matter went from being a grassroots thing to belonging to George Soros because the I don't want to say oligarchy, but the ruling structure in the United States of America corporation, okay, the United States sits on the continent of North America. It is not North America because Canada is over here as well. It allows it welcomes, it encourages misinformation. Turn on
Mm.
television and watch the news, and then go to Atlanta and watch it. You don't have to leave, but change to an Atlanta channel. Watch the news. It sounds exactly the same. When I grew up, Atlanta news was about Atlanta, Georgia. Had nothing to do with St. Louis. And they talked with a southern drawl. And they could laugh and joke. They had an entirely different cultural structure. If what I'm saying is that it's very imperative to eliminate that. Okay. And
This goes back to,
this goes back, way back to
and it's interesting that you speak about this because, and then when you brought Black Lives Matter and how it got co-opted, because this is what
Mhm.
his plan has always been, to
Yes.
have open borders, to not be able to distinguish St. Louis from Atlanta, and
Well,
why it's very important to make it blanket.
it's not just St. Louis. It's not just America. I want you to step back and look at the world. Think of all the wars, the Hyksos War, the Hittite War, the wars with, especially in North Africa, the number of wars that they had with all of the invading people. and not even with the Greeks, okay, but with all of the other non-melanated people that came down to control that area. It has been going on since, in my opinion, time immemorial. It has been here a long time. Okay. Right now, we're supposed to be in the time of the Great Jubilee. And in this Great Jubilee, known as the Great Reset, this is when feminine energy comes back into play, not to replace masculine energy, because that's not how we function. People of color always knew that it took masculine and feminine energy together to get anything done. Remember, I told you the only way to manifest is that you have to have masculine and feminine energy. You bring them together in the brain, and boom, what you're after can be manifested. We have done everything. In the Holy Trinity, there is no woman. You speak of Mary and third off here, over here. You know, you got Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Who got pregnant? I'm asking if you just have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Now you bring that down and you're telling us that a man can be a woman. The problem with that, and I don't want to talk about just chromosomes, the hip displacement. When a woman gets pregnant, her hips splay outward. The uterus tips down and it cradles the infant. A man doesn't have that. His hips are not going to splay out.
And actually, medically, they're really finding out now that if a man if a man can if a man and a woman have the same hip injury, the likelihood of the man dying from that injury is higher
Yes,
because his hips are not the same as a woman.
he can't. And when you hear, what's that guy, Dullan Mulberry, whatever his name is, talking about, oh, I'm going to have a uterus and have a baby, that's unrealistic. And here's how they fool you. At the height of all of this gender miseducation, you had, and they would show it, you had a pregnant man with a woman. When they went to the hospital had to tell them, I don't care if they are giving you testosterone to grow a beard. You have the uterus of a woman, so we have to identify you as a woman. And they got all upset. Oh no, that's not right. Oh, and I'm thinking, we are looking at a level in which insanity is running rampant. And they're saying it's okay. These are your policies, your codes, and your regulations.
So with all that, that's where it goes back to now that these policy codes and regulations they're in direct conflict with natural law.
Yes, and we can see it every day. And that's why you all wonder. You come home with a headache, you don't know what's going on. And this is why I encourage you to go out and learn this. Now, let me say this to you. Hidden Figures came. When I came home in the 90s and told people, my own folks, black folks, not just my family, but hey, I worked for NASA. 1994. I remember what they told me. They told me I was mentally ill. No black folks work for NASA. 1994, people. So when the movie Hidden Figures came out, believe me, when it came out and I started working for NASA and those women were 10 years ahead of me, do you think we had DEI and affirmative action? Didn't exist. Everything we did, we moved forward because we were a collective in the principles. We were living those principles, the 7 principles of Ma'at, okay? The 7 pillars of making a society. We didn't just live it, we brought it all the way down to your community. We had neighborhood meetings. Then we went to community meetings. Then we went to the city meetings. We attended the board meetings. because we practiced what we preached. Children felt safe, even though I knew prejudice existed. We could see it. You know, we were not immune to what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My grandmother was killed. My grandfather was killed in the massacre of 1917 in East St. Louis. So you don't have to tell me. I have been in sundown towns. I have been spat at, spat on. I've had people look at me when I had dreads and call them snakes and try to cut it off or set my hair on fire. I've been through the gamut. But I also had the ability to rely upon these, not just teachings, these are the actual way to be within you have God is within you. It is not external to you. It's not in a book. It's not on a piece of paper. It's not hanging on your wall. It's not symbolic of a cross or whatever. It lies within you. And when you truly know that, nothing stands in your way. At age 3, I wanted to work for NASA. Never knew that NASA existed. But that was my call.
You saw My Favorite Martian on TV.
I never
I'm messing
watched
with you.
that.
I know you wasn't watching that, right?
But that was my calling. Some of us already know what our calling is, and we don't live up to it because we are following the current thing. We have always been the moral compass of this country. Melanated
Let me ask you, Sister
have
Alzheimer,
always
because
been the moral
we
compass.
we hear this, right?
Hmm.
We hear this, and then you hear a lot of people that will regurgitate it, which is perfectly fine. But what does that mean? Like the melanated folks is like really holding this thing together. What does that
It means that we're going to go back to what I had said earlier. Do you remember when I said in the frequency, when awareness became conscious, we were nothing more than just energy out here. And the best way I can explain it, if you ever watched the series Star Trek and uh, Deep Space Nine, and they had that guy Odo, and remember one time Odo was stuck on an elevator and he needed to take himself back to his liquid state. And the woman that was on the elevator is really Gene Roddenberry's wife, but she played the character. I can't remember the character's name. She said, she pulled her wig off and had no hair. She said, "Look, this is me. You need to be in my lap so you can rest." Because Odo understood how to vibrate himself from his liquid state into three-dimensional man. But he could only hold that position for so long. And then he was a shapeshifter. He'd have to go back to his liquefied state. We are the actual bifurcation of consciousness. Consciousness is God, the absolute, however you wish to define that. When the bifurcation came, the exploding, the best way to say it is if you have this wonderful fine piece of china and you throw it down on the ground and it breaks into all these shards, every one of those shards is a life. You can't pick it all back up, glue it all back together and make it whole. So what you do is that you teach each one of these shards these 7 dynamic principles. And not only do you teach it for them to memorize it, but you infuse it in how they build the structures of society. Society is nothing more than the social means to construct a culture. Okay. Rituals are not some voodoo stuff that's going on. Rituals is the routine that you do. You have a ritual when you get up in the morning and get yourself together, or whatever time you get up and go out to do something. You have a ritual, a routine that you do. That's your ritual. The ritual in this country, under the guise of colonialism, is confusion. Because who did they send here? They sent here prisoners.
They sent the nobles.
Yeah, nobody. They sent prisoners and people that they didn't want in their country that didn't follow Christianity. And remember, you had to believe in the same God the king or queen believed in. And if you didn't, you were persecuted. These are the people who believed in witches and witchcraft. The whole world was in, they called it pagans, but they weren't pagans. They were in their natural state, the state of being the peasant, the person who had a direct link with the God force within them. They never saw it different. African people and the indigenous people of this land weren't worshiping trees and rivers and waters. We weren't doing that. We were saying that the energy of the river reminds me how my little brother acts, or the energy of the river gives me life. It gives me peace. Now they got you running around talking, go out grounding. Do you see what I'm saying? What they're doing now? They say, go out grounding. So they got you outside, running around barefoot in the grass. And I told my daughter, I said, don't do that. There are mites in the grass. There are chiggers in the grass.
Let
Okay.
me tell you something. It's
Huh?
tick season. It's tick season right now.
Season. Not only that, remember now we're doing chemtrails in the air. So all that depleted plutonium and uranium rains down in that grass. You're walking on it. So now you think you're going to be healthy because you're grounding? These are the same people that gave you Roundup to spray, kill off everything, and you're walking on it.
They still
No.
sell that stuff. That's amazing after all that stuff. But
Okay.
that's a whole nother discussion, right?
Right. So what I'm saying to you is that the purpose of all of the stuff that I'm giving you, it teaches you common sense. When you have common sense, fear goes away because you can see it just as it is. That's why there is Ma'at. What did she say? It's not justice. It's just Just. This This. That's what justice is. It's just this. And Ma'at is not blind. Justice is not blind. Because when you don't see something and what you hear, you will be amazed what you hear. And then when you see it, it's like, oh, that ain't what I thought it was at all. So justice is not blind. Once again, these are codes, policies, and regulations. And they have you believing this is okay. What we're seeing is when we step back. And now I'm going to give you an example. When I grew up, lots of Black women worked in homes for white people. They weren't the wealthiest white people,
Yeah,
but they would be considered,
my grandmother did.
okay, upper middle class, and they would be there working. Now, just like in The Maid, the movie The Maid, when you would see those Black women, okay, little Miss So-and-so, you can't do that. Don't do that. That makes you ugly. You're acting nasty. You're being ugly. Okay. Now, she's raising these people's children. She's putting her values on these children. There's nothing wrong with it. But the thing is that you're denigrating her the whole time she's raising your child. Your child grows up having a different viewpoint of the world. When that Black woman is no longer needed, you fire her. But she has instilled a common sense, cultural understanding of the world into your daughter. So what do? You, as the white person, creates conflict. Once that conflict comes, A confused mind always says no. That little girl is going to align herself with the teaching with her family. She looks like them. She's a part of them. She don't look like you. Okay, so then as we educated ourselves for the purpose of making sure our children didn't become the maids, the butlers, and all of that, and our children didn't align themselves with that, we had to forge a way through college to make sure that we offered new things to our children. Okay, so the new things come along. These families, which were used to having a black maid, they now hired Hispanic people. A
Hmm.
wave of them came, and then a wave of Asians came. At the height of civil rights, I love America, the United States, they brought Asian people here. You know why they brought them here? Because they put them against us. Put them down, and they do it now. When they have a wave of Asians that come in, where do they put them? In the black community. You used to go up the street to Uncle Sam because you knew that man. You grew up with him. He had the wig place. It wasn't fancy, but he had the hair place. You go in there and find anything you need, stuff was working for your head, you were doing well. Then they got rid of him. They forced him out and they put the Asian family in there.
Mama Kim.
It was whether it was Chinese, Korean,
Mama
Japanese.
Kim. It was Mama Kim.
Okay, Mama Kim. Now, Mama Kim is there. You have a language barrier. The problem is that Mama Kim, and I heard this when I was working with NASA from from many of my coworkers who were not U.S. citizens, but they were here on a visa working for NASA, told me, "Hey, we can't hang out with you. Why can't me?" I'm thinking me personally. He's like, "No, we can't hang out with your people because if we hang out with your people, we would lose our visa."
And they were getting told that at customs.
They were told that at customs. So this is not what you see or know. So they let these people in, and they are taught to not trust us. And then where do they put them? They don't put them out there with the white people. They put them down here with you. And therefore, here you go. You got this trust thing going, this, anxiety that's unnecessary, absolutely unnecessary. And because it's unnecessary, but we are the butt end of what goes on, we don't know, we're fighting them. And then as we grow up, we teach our kids, don't like them. They're just like what the white man say, them the chinks, them the this is that. And it's not true. It's because they were indoctrinated to believe. So what happened is that as we people of color elevated ourselves, moved our children away from the needs of being in servitude to you at that level, your maid,
Yeah.
taking care of your children. You bring in these new people to do that. And I had to laugh because I remember when Miss Savager told me, she said, "Yeah, Kathy, the way the lady wanted me to do X, Y, and Z." And I was like, so how did you help her job? It's not my job. My job stopped at such and such a time. I'm out. And I laughed because that was not how we were. And
Yeah,
part of
because
the indoctrination was through slavery. We didn't stop.
my
Okay.
grandmother took care of her family. She took care of them. She started out,
Hmm.
and I remember she probably started out before that, but this particular family, she took care of the mother.
Oh, Lord.
Then, when the
Hmm.
mother passed away, she took care of the guy that hired her.
Oh, Lord.
She took care of him. He
Hmm.
passed away.
Wow.
And then when she passed away, my grandmother passed away,
Hmm.
the grandson
Took over.
made sure that my family,
Hmm.
knew the
Hmm.
impact that my grandmother had on him as a little boy,
Hmm.
all of, to take care of his grandmother and his father. Like he really loved my grandmother.
So this is why I go back to saying what I say. Because in my opinion, I feel that the old families feel that they may not get into heaven for all the mistreatment they had done, not only to us, not only to Black people who were descendants of slaves, but to the indigenous populations of Black natives that were here. And Chief Mimi speaks on that because they were the same color as us. And with that, when these people come to the end of their life,
Fred X said they not.
well, that's
He
not
said
true.
they ain't getting out of they ain't getting in there.
But the bottom line is that this is my opinion. I think they are afraid. That is why they knock us down as people, but they also incorporate the hatred of the woman, okay? The embodiment of how they dislike women.
Mm.
So with that embodiment, the woman is always on the back. She's a backseater. And see, they leave out the fact that Black women came to help the women's suffrage movement, but you'll never hear about it.
Oh, we're gonna talk about
We
that.
played a major role in everything that goes on because we were here first. We understood what was going on. And then they played us because they manipulated the words and how it was used. And they made sure that you kill off the old, the people who had the knowledge, and you go to the children who don't have the knowledge because you didn't have a chance to teach it to them. And then you make it mandatory for those children to go to the systems that you put into place that you call education. Now, another example, critical race theory. Why is that important?
Hey, you blew
Because
my
it doesn't
mind.
apply to you at all. You know why? It only applies to the Senate, the House of Representatives, judges, and lawyers. Their role is to set up a committee that goes through and look at all of what we call the Jim Crow laws, the Blue Coat laws of many of the states. First, they're looking at all the states down south, including Missouri, that participated in the slave business. And then they were going to migrate to the north, the northeast, central, and then northwest. They're looking at the laws. They want to be sure that they're not keeping laws on the books that they can go back and recapture and say, you violated that law, oh, you're going to go to jail. And certain laws were written to make sure that it worked against us. That's the critical race theory, because they want to critically look at these laws and remove them from the books, put them in a historical place, but remove them from the books or the annals in which they can pull up this law and continue to use it whenever they feel like it. They're not going to do that. Now they have you believe that it has everything to do with what they're going to do in the school. And I fought DeSantos for that. This guy, Charlie Kirk, quite a few of them, because they're speaking like this, you know, as though they know that. But that's not what it's about. Not at
Mm.
all. And then once in a while they'll mention it, but they do that because people are saying, no, that's not what this is about. But once again, they're manipulating the narrative.
Yeah. Literally changing the whole meaning and the
Right.
premise of
And that is what,
critical race theory. Yeah.
right. That's what's causing them to fight among themselves. This is not our fight.
Mm.
Our place is to know who we are. Sia eka pata neteru. Know thyself. The universe knows who you are. You don't know who you are. And the minute you learn who you are, you can have better control over how you interact with them, what you're going to do. You know, what I'm beginning to see are Black people with money acting like the very system we're trying to get rid of. I don't want to see this system in blackface.
Oh, they. If anybody has any questions for Sister Azima before we close out,
I want to say this
just put it.
about
I was gonna say that they are the very gatekeepers of the system.
yes, the boulets, and we don't need that. We don't need it. The black nobility.
And the thing, and I know that Chief Mimi, before we close out,
Hmm.
anybody, like I said, anybody got any questions, just let us know now
Hmm.
before we close out. But before we close out, and I know Chief Mimi is going to explain it,
Hmm.
how this group of people, indigenous people,
Hmm.
and some descendants of chattel slavery,
Hmm.
they never assimilated.
No, never.
And this is important for us to understand.
Hmm.
The ones that did assimilate are the
Hmm.
people that we call the Boule,
Hmm.
and why they're still angry.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they tell you, you
Hmm.
niggas don't know nothing.
Hmm.
Y'all
Hmm.
don't want to do it because it is a group of people who didn't assimilate then, and their descendants and people now. We know
Hmm.
that we might have some people that may have assimilated in our families, but however, there has always been a group of people who have always been steadfast
Hmm.
with assimilating
Hmm.
to our oppressors,
Hmm.
or like, and just really want to be left alone.
Hmm.
Just leave us alone. Whatever you got going on over there, you got going on
Just
over
yeah.
there. Just
We want to be a community within a. We want to be a nation that acts like a community. Just stay over there. We're
yeah,
good. And see, she'll teach you that the reservations were not for the indigenous people. They were
mm.
not for the Native Americans. They were for the white people who came to America. They had to put them someplace, and so they made reservations for them.
and
And
it,
and she'll tell you how
and it's
all of
very
that.
it's very important. I was going through last week's show, and I was you guys in the chat that I really want you guys to and I know that you guys support the channel, and I appreciate what you guys do, because without you guys, it would not be no Let's Talk Too. But she said something that was so profound when I was listening to it over again, where she was explaining, and nobody asked her, but hopefully next week we'll ask her. She was explaining how they were brought over here to work. And because we have to understand that these people were criminals.
Hmm.
This was basically a satellite jail unit
So was
for,
Australia. Hmm.
yeah.
And
So,
so was Central Africa. Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
So it's very important that we understand it, like, oh, so basically, understanding, even going to what we were taught about the Boston Tea Party, I know that she's going to explain exactly what happened and why it didn't happen. The tax,
Hmm.
the tax. So with that, you have any final thoughts, Sister Azima? Yeah,
Well,
yeah, FredEx Australia too as well, and
yeah.
Australia has a very big indigenous population, and they're known, and they let it be known.
Hmm. Yeah,
Any
well,
final?
you just love everything. When you start learning all about the purpose of the Statue of Liberty, she got chains on her feet because she's a woman who was freed, and you're gonna learn all about, they had us believing Abraham Lincoln freed us, and he didn't. Not at all. Not at all.
And that right there it should be on
Hmm.
everybody's
Hmm.
thought right now, as you see Donald Trump
Hmm.
um,
He can't
questioning
do
and
what's
got
right.
talking about the 14th Amendment.
Hmm.
And if SCOTUS takes this case, if Supreme Court decides to take this 14th Amendment birthership
Hmm.
case, it
Hmm.
will have probably one of the most monumental rulings that would probably reshape this country.
Hmm.
So everybody should. I know everybody not into law and understand that stuff, but
It
it,
will
it
directly affect you, and
yeah.
this you must know this. And like I asked you all, buy the Constitution. Go and get a Constitution. Please do. Please get it with the articles, okay? The Bill of Rights, and it's imperative because as we go on, Right now, Prager University is rewriting the Constitution, the 14th Amendment. Be aware of that. So you need to get your hands on the old version of the Constitution. Remember when I told you it's very important to have documents, books? It's very important to have the old books, not these new books that come out, these e-books and all that, because you can. I ordered an e-book. It's supposed to have been 300 pages and got 15 pages. Went back and complained. I got my money back, but why?
It was they hit you. It was an abridgment.
Right, it was. And so I don't want you to just buy books and ebooks because they can change it. And then on what you all don't realize, even if you download it to your computer or Kindle, there is a subset of encrypted files in there that eliminates that book after 30 days, and you won't have it.
And if you guys decide to move, and I was told this years ago, just a offhand suggestion. You guys decide to move. A lot of us move from where we were from to other places. The first thing that you should do when you move from one spot to another is go down to the library
Mm-hmm,
and understand the history of the town or city that you moved to,
mm-hmm,
and understand what's in that honor society,
mm-hmm,
and knowing, can you be there. I
mm-hmm.
would just say you might not supposed to be there, and it goes all the way back to what Sister Azima has been sharing with us the last few weeks with knowing who you are, um, because as travelers of the land, and we need to be a little bit more conscious where we could go and just not have this thing where, oh, I got some money now, I can move such and such. It don't work like that.
It doesn't.
So with that, appreciate you guys for joining us for this conversation tonight. Look forward to Chief Mimi being here with us next week. And as always, Sister Azim, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. And
Thank you.
with that,
Thank you. I am humbled by this. Thank you very much.
with that, everybody, take care. Have a great week.